Shalom Mashpaka. Today I want to talk about something that's kind of not being spoken about, but there are theories about it, and I would like to talk about Pangea. Pangea is the collection of all the land masses that we have today, the separated continents, all into one giant landmass. This is the way that it has been depicted. And I would like to talk about it as its connection to the Great Flood. Now, I'm in Genesis chapter 7, which is the flood chapter, and I'm going to show you a couple of verses to kind of depict what I'm trying to talk about. Let's start going into some of these verses. Let's go into verse 6. Now, notice it says, Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the waters was upon Ha'aratz, or the land. It did not use the word Tabal. The word Tabal means world, the entire world, the entire inhabitable world. Instead, it uses the land. How can it be that if it's the entire world and there are separate lands, separate bodies of lands known as continents? In this map, all of these lands are still one land, the land, Mashpaka. Mashpaka, I want you to know that this map right here is what they are saying the world has been for millions of years. Would you say that this is the land over here? That these lands are included? There can only be one explanation. I'm going to teach of it. Let's go back into Genesis chapter 7. Let's go into verse 10. And it came to pass after the 7th Yom that the waters of the flood were upon the land. Verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. The windows of the sky, the Shamayim, were open. Going into verse 11, it says that the fountains of the great deep were broken up. Let's go into this word right here for deep. It means the depths, the deep places, the abyss, the deep, the sea. So the fountains in the ocean were broken up. There was a complete cracking of the earth's crust to allow these waters underneath to come up like a spring, like a fountain. And the windows of the Shamayim were open, the windows of the sky. So it wasn't just rain or water from Shamayim that came, it was also the fountains underneath the earth in the deep parts of the ocean, the sea. The only way that these fountains could be broken up like that is because of seismic activity. Earthquakes, Mashpaka, earthquakes. The exact word was not given, however, and I'm going to point out some things. Again, verse 12, and the rain was upon the land 40 days and 40 nights. It speaks of his sons and everybody going into the ark, including all the animals. Verse 17, and the flood was 40 days upon the land, and the waters increased, and the bared up the ark, and it was lifted up above the land. Mashpaka, I've tried to read this in different ways, basically explaining that the land could be like this, and that it was the biblical land, all of this area, that was the only part that was subject to this flood. However, it says right here in verse 19, let's go into this verse. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the land, and all the high hills that were under the whole Shamayim were covered. All the high mountains, the high hills were covered under all of the heavens, all of the sky were covered by this flood. So that basically debunks the fact that this is only the biblical lands that were flooded. No, Mashpaka, the entire map was flooded. And the only way that we could read it correctly is that the way that it is said. It is not Tabal, it is using the land. And Pangea was one entire land, Mashpaka, one entire giant land. It says, verse 20, 15 cubits upwards did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that move upon the earth, both birds, cattle, beasts, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the land, and every man. Going into verse 21 just to prove. And every flesh upon ha'aratz, the land, and the beast and every creeping thing upon ha'aratz, every ha'adam, every man died. So, Mashpaka, if we are looking at a map like this, these are multiple lands. Let me explain. Mashpaka, this is an example of lands. See, it says ha'aratz ut. That's plural, the lands. In Genesis 7, it never uses in any of these verses multiple lands. It only uses the land, Mashpaka, symbolizing that the entire continents were just one giant land at that time of the Great Flood, and that there were seismic activities, earthquakes of some sort, or fissures, splitting of the crust underneath at the abyss of the bottom of the seas to let up these fountains. At this point in time, something similar to this is what was the land at this time. Later on, it moved into something like this, and I'm going to show you when that happened. Mashpaka, I'm in Genesis chapter 11. This is the time of Babel. Okay? Now, we're in the descendants of Shem. We're going to go down to where it says Peleg. This is the descendant that we are looking for. If we go back one chapter to Genesis 10, it speaks of why Peleg was important. Genesis chapter 10, verse 25. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The names was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, the land divided. Let's go into this verse. Scrolling down, we see this word right here, Peleg. This is the name of the descendant of Shem. And he was named this because for in his days was ha'aratz, the land, Peleg, divided. Let's get some understandings on this name now. I'm going to go into the example that was given here. Divided, to split, to division. Underneath the description it says to divide as a channel or a watercourse. I'm going to get into Psalms 55 verse 10 in a minute. Now let's go into the name of Peleg. This means division. But what type of division does it mean? Mashpaka, it means earthquake. This is basically symbolizing that the earth was divided. Giant earthquakes were happening at the same time and divided the land after the Great Flood, which took the map from one land into the lands that we have today. Now, Mashpaka, I am back in Genesis chapter 10, verse 25. Let's go back to the actual use of the earth was divided. This is using Peleg as a different vowel points. So let's go and see where this other word is used. It is only used 4 times in all the scriptures, and one of them is included in Psalms 55:9. And it says, destroy, Adoni, divide, Peleg, their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in their city. So, Mashpaka, if you Google what this actually means of Peleg and division of the earth, they are trying to say that it is the universal language that was divided, that the Tower of Babel fell and it divided the people, it divided their tongues. Here is an explanation that is being given. Genesis chapter 10 verse 25 states 2 sons were born to Eber. One was Peleg because in his days the earth was divided, and his brother name was Joktan. The key points is the meaning of Peleg. whose name means division. This refers to division of people groups, most likely the Tower of Babel event, where Elohim confused languages and scattered humanity. Though not physically splitting of land, the earth was divided, signifying the separation of nations by language and territory. So, Mashpaka, they are trying to put false information here and add to the word that is here, saying that it is an interpretation, a meaning. Mashpaka, if it would have meant divide people, it would have said divide people. If it would have said divide the tongues, it would have said divide the tongues. It says right here, the land was divided, Mashpaka. That's the exact word that was written. Do not take from the word and do not add to the word. That is where people are getting everything wrong. I'm going to show you some supporting things for it. Let's go into Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. And all Ha'arats, all the land, was of one language, one tongue, and of one speech. So this is what they're saying. They're drawing conclusions where now it's saying the land, and they are connecting the languages that are used in this verse of speech to what it means by dividing the language and the people used in Genesis 10:25. Scrolling down in Genesis chapter 11, verse 9, let's go into this verse. And they confounded the language. They confused all the language of the land from henceforth, and scattered abroad the face of the earth. This word right here is not palag, Mashpaka. This means something else. This means to scatter or to disperse, Mashpaka. There is a separate thing that happened with the people. They were scattered. The word palag is not used at the same context as what it means for scatter. There are two separate things going on. Scattering of the people of the tongues and the division of the land happening at the same time. These mean two separate things. Mashpaka, there are several words that mean divide and separate in scriptures. Pay close attention to which one is using them. Genesis chapter 1 verse 6 says, let it divide the waters from the waters. Here is another word, H22:19. This means to scatter, to cast away abroad, to disperse, to spread out. There are several words that can be used for these meanings, but the words that are used in these verses are the ones that were chosen. So, Mashpaka, Palag, the name of Palag literally means earthquakes. And the way that Palag is used in Genesis chapter 10, verse 25, is literally saying to earthquake or separate the land, a division of the land, into what is like this. But Mashpaka, there are theories about this. Now that I've shown you the exact words of what they use, and what, if you look up this information, what it's trying to tell you what it means, that is the division of the languages of the people, and I'm showing that they were using different words for those subjects, those verses. How is it that these lands traveled this far from each other in only a short amount of time? Where if you Google how long this actually took, it says it took over millions of years for this to happen. Here's an explanation of how it really happened. Rapid continental drift happened, scientifically known as catastrophic plate tectonics, is a geological model primarily used by creation scientists to explain how the Earth's surfaces changed during and after the flood. It adapts standard plate tectonic principles by replacing the millions of years timeline with a massive rapid event. Core mechanisms, runaway, subduction, and central engines of this theory is a process called thermal runaway. Initial breaks, some event caused the dense cold pre-flood ocean floor to begin sinking into the Earth's mantle. Heat and viscosity. As these slabs sank, the friction generated intense heat, which made the surrounding mantle material less viscous, more slippery. Accelerated sinking. This reduced resistance allowed the plates to sink even faster, creating a feedback loop where subduction reached speeds of meters per second rather than centimeters per year. So this meant they moved extremely fast. Continental sprint. As the ocean floor subducted rapidly, it pulled the attached continents along like a conveyor belt, causing them to sprint into their current positions in a matter of months. Formations of mountains, the high-speed collision of these continental plates, like two speeding cars, provided the energy necessary to buckle the crust and thrust up mountains ranges like the Himalayas and the Alps. Fountains of the great deep, the rapid seafloor spreading at mid-ocean reaches forced hot magma into contact with ocean waters, creating massive linear geysers of the superheated steam that shot into the atmosphere, contributing to global rainfall. Relation to Pelag. While CPT, catastrophic plate tectonics, is primarily a flood model, roughly 2350 BCE. Some researchers connected to the Pelag event, 2247 BCE, as the final setting of the tectonic activity. Post-flood adjustment. After the initial rapid movement stopped, the Earth underwent centuries of isostatic readjustment, characterized by frequent massive earthquakes and volcanic activities as the plate stabilized. Physical division. Some suggest that the division of the Earth and the Pelag refers to the final breakings of the land bridges or the openings of the specific rifts, like the Red Sea, during the settling period. Scientific and theological challenges. The heat problems. Secular and some creationist critics note that moving continents at such speed will release enough energy to melt the Earth's crust and boil the oceans. Proponents often suggest Elohim may have used a supernatural cooling mechanism. Standard geological views. Mainstream scientists reject catastrophic plate tectonics, maintaining that tectonic plates moved at a constant slow rate of roughly 2.5 to 10 centimeters per year based on millions of years of data. So, Mashpaka, these are the interpretations of what it is. The linguistic division, basically the interpretation of the Tower of Babel that was separated, and the geological division. These are not separate, Mashpaka. They happened at the same time. They came about from each other, being separated by language and by these earthquakes, the separation of the land. This separation of Pangea, or the one major supercontinent, led into what it is today and how it slowly formed, not over millions of years, but only in months, that fast of time, as it was shifting tectonic plates across vast amounts of oceans. Now, Mashpaka, let's get back into Genesis chapter 11. It says that all of this happened during the time of Pelag. All of these people were separated, and the flood subsided, and everyone came from Noah. And all that was in the land was confounded of their languages, and the lands was split. So that means the people that were there, that were split during the time of Pelag, were not of Abraham, because Abraham came after. And Abraham is the father of Isaac, who is the father of Jacob, who is the father of the 12 tribes. If we look at a map today, Mount Ararat, which is the mountain that Noah landed on when the flood subsided, is right here in this part of the land. And after all the continental drifts that happened, Abraham was in Mesopotamia, in this land, over here, which is only a short ways from where the mountain was at. So all of these indigenous people that are of these other lands that were already established here, now, after the continental changing of the map from the supercontinent to the 7 major continents, these aboriginal people or native people to these lands are not of the 12 tribes, and they never were there. And Abraham was the father going into Isaac, into Jacob, which was the father of the 12 tribes, and they all stemmed from Mesopotamia, from this land. Everyone that is from these other continents were separated, and they are not the descendants anymore, and they never were. Back in Genesis chapter 11, Pelag was a descendant of Shem, and all of these other descendants happened. All these other fathers happened in generations before Abraham. A lot of time had happened. Hundreds of years. By the time Abraham was about, all of these lands had already been scattered and separated. So anyone that is not from Abraham and from Mesopotamia and from his lineage, these other native descendant aboriginal people are not included in the 12 tribes at all. So Mashpaka, as of right now, that is the way I would depict and say, based off of the scriptures of what they literally say happened to the supercontinent that was Pangea, that was called Ha'aratz, the land. I hope this information has revealed some truth to you, and fact check me if you want to. Also, Mashpaka, if you want to know some other theories that might be true, look up the canopy theory. The canopy theory basically states that there was a vapor canopy in the atmosphere that we had, and when the windows were open, were basically where the vapor canopy ceased to be, and all the water collected in the atmosphere descended upon the earth. This vapor canopy allowed people to live and grow to be tall and huge and live long lives, and that's why there were giant trees and there were Nephilim and giants about that lived to be almost 1,000+ years old. Check out that theory if you want to know more about that, because it seems to be a lot of talk going on about it as well. That is all, Mashpaka. Ahaba Shalom.